Is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. First, foremost, our big, what was supposed to happen on Labor Day, postponed, but our big announcement that we are going to be embarking on a multi-state radio tour. Going to pack up the crew, going to head across Pennsylvania, Ohio, into Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. We're going to go into rural communities, and we're going to talk about, well, how do we reclaim, rebuild, and demand a prosperous working class? The working class hero tour, as I'm kind of leaning towards. I'd love to hear folks their thoughts on what a good name would be. Been in the works for a couple of weeks. Weren't sure we were going to be able to fund it. Weren't sure we were going to be able to throw it together. Well, we've decided full bore we're going to go forward, because a lot of folks have reached out and said, hey, it'd be great if you came to our town and did little events. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to hit cities across those states. Going to do the little program there. Going to hold events. Going to do listening. But the point of this, and this is where I want to get to, because I believe, and I've been saying this for the longest time, I believe our divisions are not as great as people think they are. I believe that we've been focused and pitted against each other on the right-left frame, the blue team, the red team, when the reality is it's the green team. And I go back to this when I was a kid. I was one of the few white kids in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I learned very young that it wasn't the only color that really mattered wasn't white or black, but it was green, because we were all broke. All of us were in the same economic position. There wasn't food at the end of the month. There was no opportunity, virtually no hope. And I believe that once you tear down that construct and we start talking about policy and moving where we want to go, I think we can get there. Now, as I've been saying, I think the kernel of truth, the nugget that Donald Trump uncovered, is that the working class of this country has been abandoned by both parties. His rhetoric and his salesman pitch courted those folks who either remember or cling to the memory of a strong, prosperous working class. And the reason we're choosing to go to smaller towns and cities in rural areas is because they're the ones who got really, really wiped out. You go into some of these towns that used to have the factory there or the mill or whatever that created the prosperity that a lot of us like to harken back to and cling to the memory of. That when we were identified as the town that made glass or the town that made rubber or whatever, the town that made cars, when we were that, we had an identity, and those jobs created a reverberation effect, so that Main Street had shops in it and people had other jobs, and it built an economy of broad prosperity and opportunity. And when the wealth class of this country, with bad politicians created, bad policy, bad trade deal, and don't forget CEO and shareholder greed. When they ripped that factory away or that mill away or that identity away, what was left was chaos. Was drugs, desperation, broken families, all of the horrible things that we know happened. And my thought in this has been, look, you can recreate that kind of prosperity again by having smart policy, a tax code that rewards work and not gambling on Wall Street, that rewards people who do work hard and play by the rules so that they actually can get ahead. that we do that with strong labor unions and strong democratic principles, not the direction that we're heading. And I think we're at a crossroads in this moment. I really believe we're in a moment where we can easily head down the road of authoritarianism. And I know that sounds extreme. And today I had a conversation with my dentist who, Tea Party guy, good dentist though. But, actually, as he said, I've kind of moved him a little bit to this side. Not all the way, but yeah, we're moving because we're agreeing on a lot more now because he's seeing the extremism that has come out of that whole thing. But even he, admits, look, you think back to when we had those strong labor unions and we had workers who had the ability to support a family on one income. You had a much more stable society. This idea that we the winner takes all and hooray for me, and the heck with you, and greed is good, and the one who dies with the most toys wins. That mentality hasn't done well for broad-based working class America, and the people harmed by it, the most are in those rural communities where we've driven through and we've seen the boarded up storefronts and the factory that looks like it was bombed. So we're going to seek out those places and we're going to talk to people and find, hey, what policies what can we do to turn this around? Now, I believe this is where my starting premise is coming from. I believe we're at a moment of a crossroad. I think what Biden and the Biden administration has done policy-wise on investing in infrastructure, the CHIPS bill, this Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to help you do some reshoring of manufacturing and of renewables. This idea of buying American and rewarding, having policy and procurement that's going to demand that. I think this is the direction we need to go, and I believe we're at a crossroads. We can continue down that path of demanding that domestic production for domestic consumption, that our tax dollars are used to create jobs that help people, that help communities, that regain an identity for those places. Or we can just rip the rug out, and we can go backwards. We can do what the Republicans have wanted to do, and undo all of these policies, and take us down the road towards more divisiveness, more desperation, less opportunity. I think this is the moment of choice. And the reason I'm feeling this way is I remember as a kid going back, I remember the Carter administration really well because that's kind of when I became politically aware. I was delivering the newspaper as a kid, and you're reading the headlines, you're reading the news. But I remember being just fascinated by the opportunity of what we can have, solar power. We can have, because I remember I had a calculator, a little tiny calculator that we got that was solar powered. Didn't do much, but you go, this is amazing. And as a kid who grew up on Omni magazine and Ray Bradbury and science fiction and all of that, this idea that the Jetsons could be our reality was powerful for me. I now look back at that election of 1980 as a crossroads moment. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, moving us in the direction of using technology. Now, granted, they were very rudimentary. They just heated the hot water for the White House and did a good job of it. Then you had Ronald Reagan elected because he presented a different vision. One of hooray for me and the heck with everybody else. And the first thing they did is they ripped the solar panels off the White House, put in a good oil burner. And here we are 40 plus years later with that policy. And looking in the rearview mirror, I now look at the significance of that 1980 election going, that mattered. And you go, elections matter. I think we're heading towards that moment right now. We're heading down that road to where elections matter. And we're on a path that could begin to help us rebuild what my grandparents' generation built, which is a prosperous working class, opportunities for people. And that's why we're going to embark on this Working Class Hero Road Tour. We are going to get out and talk to people. And look, maybe we're going to take some abuse. Maybe we're going to take some beatings. But this has to happen. This is what Democrats, the reason Democrats are failing so badly is they don't know how to talk to rural voters. They don't know how to address those issues of trade, of tax policy, of things that working class people care about. So I'm curious your thoughts. If you've got a city that you think, hey, this is a great place to go. Things were good at one point. They turned really horribly. And maybe there's some hope and opportunity. Maybe there's, because of these policies, there's some investment moving in a positive direction. These are the places we want to go. This is the stuff we want to talk about and the people we want to talk about. So by all means, suggestions, we want to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. But love to hear your thoughts. Good idea, bad idea. Will you show up? Because we're going to be heading to listening areas across the states that we're heading through. By all means, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
One 866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. According to the most recent IBD tip poll, Biden's approval rating has gone up 6.6%, the highest since April at 49%. Younger Americans happy because, look, you got the student loan forgiveness money that's helping push in the right direction. But overall, the polling that's being done right now, Americans are feeling better about the economy. Gas prices are coming down, figuring out how to deal with some of the price increases. Some wages are still popping up, and this idea that workers are finally taking some control and demanding better opportunities at work. This is kind of a big deal. In fact, the most recent polling from NPR and PBS, they point out that 30% of Americans now say rising prices are their number one issue, and that's down from 37%. So heading in the right direction, because look, gas prices have been falling. I forget how many days in a row now, but it's been a number. Of course, it's been a number. It's been like 40, 50 days. It's been heading in the right direction. And what's interesting to me is I'm watching conservatives lose their minds, trying to remind people of, well, look at all the things Joe Biden did, and what it. I was reading an op-ed by one of the think tanks, and this person was going on about all of the perceived failures. They go, well, there was no baby formula, gas prices are high, and you go, well, the reality is that's the free market, that's capitalism at work. Would you like a command economy that Biden would have the ability to ration stuff? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where their argument was, because all of the failures are the things that they promote the most. Consolidation. The fact the baby formula front is one of those. You don't hear much about it anymore because Biden and the administration did something, and no credit there. But it's interesting to me that they want to remind people of the pain and the misery and the anger, and because they want us angry and pitted against each other. And part of the reason that I want to do this road trip is, for me, I like having conversations with people who we don't agree with, because I think you can hammer out. I've always believed that two people can sit down and you can hammer out an agreement. I believe that you can come to some kind of an agreement, no matter how much you disagree. There's always going to be common ground. And look, at least I used to believe that. I think that the vast majority of Americans want the same things. Safe neighborhoods, good quality jobs that support a family, good education for their children, opportunity for the future. Those kind of simple education, healthcare, that kind of make my life better stuff. I think we all agree on that. And I've always said that, the difference between most people is the pathway at which we get there. We want clean water, we want clean air. At least I think so. I used to believe it. I'm still kind of clinging to it. But I'm in this spot where we're going to get out and we're going to talk to people, because we've been told that we're so polar opposite, and that we're supposed to hate each other, especially when you talk about the divisions that they throw out at us: white, black, male, female, gay, straight. Good on the list. Rural, urban, the other big one. Where I live in Pennsylvania, that's the big thing. That divide. And look, it's always couched in terms of racism. It's always couched in terms of what divides us instead of what brings us together, and how there is a relationship between rural and urban communities. One can't exist without the other. But we're not allowed to talk about that. And that's where I think this can be, especially as we head up to the election, this can give us the opportunity to be a little frustrated, maybe to scream and holler and kick and scream a bit, but ultimately to figure out how we come back together. Because as I've said before, I believe the workplace is where we have to first organize. This is the place where we can agree on things. I know very few people who say, no, I don't want better wages, hours, and conditions. No, I don't want health care for my family. No, I don't want retirement security. No, I don't want safe working conditions. Those are for the weak. You don't hear many people saying that. So for me, we can bring working people back together on the things that we agree on. And I go back to election night 2020. While everyone was watching the TV screens, wondering, who's going to count what vote. I was leading a strike of 55 workers who 3/4 of them voted for Trump. But they were fighting the right fight, the righteous fight. A company that was, enormously profitable, trying to raise their healthcare costs and lower their standard of living. They all stood up in unison and said, no, we're going to demand better. If we're essential, if we're frontline heroes, and if we're better than all this, then yeah, us. Yeah. And this is one of those moments where I'm hoping this tour gives us the ability to have those conversations. Because again, I'm looking at what this administration is doing. In any other period, other than this era right now, this stuff would be wildly popular. You would have had Republicans voting for it. You'd had Democrats voting for it. It would have been a kumbaya moment. Everybody would have been involved. Infrastructure? Later on in the program, we'll have my good friend Bob Ney, a former Republican congressman, who used to say, look, infrastructure, that was a no-brainer. That's what brought people together. And that's what you brought home to your districts. When in 2010, when the Republicans were losing their mind with the Tea Party people, railing on about pork barrel spending. And I'm saying, well, let's talk about what kind of pork barrel spending. Because, when Congress people and senators bring projects home, like, a bridge to nowhere eventually leads somewhere. And that kind of investment then means something. Hospitals and schools and museums and the stuff that they used to bring home, bringing home the bacon, was good for the community. It was good for them. It's what got them reelected, because, hey, look what I did. But it was good for the community. It built the community, it built solidarity, it built identity, and it created jobs. We used to understand that. Now, did they abuse some of it? Yeah, there's anytime you're talking about people, There's always going to be abuses. Anytime you're talking about people, there's always going to be someone who screws it up. And that's why you hold them accountable. That's why we have the ultimate term limiter. We have the power of the vote. And this election cycle, for me, is one of those moments where we're at that crossroads. Some of the things that this administration has done, I am thrilled with. The investments in infrastructure, $1.2 trillion in infrastructure, that's great. It's not enough. I'll be the first to tell you that. The American Society of Civil Engineers says at this point we need probably 4 times that, because we've so neglected investing in our infrastructure over decades. But it's a push in the right direction. The CHIPS bill, which is going to help us on a jobs front, on rebuilding a community front, but also a national security front. That is good policy, something that, back in the old days, the good old days, everyone would have been behind. And yet, because of the construct that's been thrown at us, because of the divisions that the powers to be, remember, it's not right-left, in my view, it's up-down. What the moneyed interests want is a divided working class. They want people looking at their neighbors with a jaundiced eye, looking at them saying, you're the problem. And of course, looking at the people that they want, the others. And you create the other class so that you can get people to vote against their economic interests. For me, it all comes back down to economics. It all comes down to opportunities. It all comes back down to being that kid growing up in the projects, knowing that nobody in the neighborhood had food, let alone us, and that people were robbing each other just to put some food on the table. There is something wrong in that world. And policy-wise, we can make that better. We can change things. We have the ability. At least that's what I believe. I would love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And maybe we're going to come to a town near you. At this point, we're going to be kicking off, it looks like, in the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton area on the 1st of October, and making our way right across the state, into Erie, into Youngstown, Toledo. I mean, Toledo to me is one of there's a bunch of fascinating places, but Toledo to me is one of those places that they were the glass capital of the world. They were the glass capital of the world. And the last time we were there in 2013 for our labor history tour, we went to the museum that marked the memory, commemorated the Toledo area being the glass capital of the world at one point. And asking the curator, so where'd you get the glass? And the glass in the Glass Museum, honoring the memory of Toledo being the glass capital of the world, was made where. Was made in China. There's a problem with that. And we can change that. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, radio host Tom Hartman going to be here to talk about his new book, which fits right into this, titled The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, How Reaganism Gutted America and How Restore Its Greatness.
Calling all builders, all welders and roofers, engineers and electricians, calling all brick masons and boiler makers, steel workers and steam fitters. Your country is calling you to rebuild America, to create a cleaner, safer, more prosperous future for all. Tackling climate change, this is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
It takes a lot to raise a family. A good job, a good salary, and some patience. A lot of people my age are drowning in college debt. But I chose a different path. I'm a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I work hard for my job, and I love what I do. I had a lot of choices for my future, but I made the best choice for my family. IBEW, the right choice.
So my next guest fits perfectly into our big announcement of the Rural Voter Road Tour, the Working Class Hero Road Tour. Because look, he's now written the book on what our thesis was. The Reagan era, that crossroads moment of, do we head down the road of renewable energies and solar panels and opportunity in that, or do we stay on the dirty stuff and choose a path of, well, what got us? I'm looking at this moment in that same kind of frame. So here to talk about his most recent book, I've asked radio host Tom Hartman to come talk with us. He's the author of The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, How Reaganism Gutted America, and How to Restore Its Greatness. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks so much for having me on your program.
So, this couldn't have fit better, because this is the exact kind of stuff that I've been talking about and that we want to talk about on this tour as we go through, small towns and rural communities across, the number of states we're going through. But this is an education moment, I think, for a lot of people to go, look, things were good. I mean, we had a prosperous, broadly shared middle class. Workers were doing well. And what killed that? And I argue it was the Reagan era.
Yeah, Reaganism, neoliberalism, supply-side economics, trickle-down economics, whatever you want to call it. You're absolutely right. When Reagan came into office, 2/3 of America basically was in the American middle class, over 65% of Americans. In large part, that was because 1/3 of Americans had a good union job, which meant another 1/3 of Americans had the same wages and benefits, because union jobs defined the local wage floor. And, now we're down to 6% in the private sector of unionization, and the middle class is down to 45% of America. 20% of the middle class has become the working poor in the 40 years that we've had neoliberal economics or Reaganomics. And, it's gutted this country. And good on you for taking the message to rural America, because a lot of these folks are just watching Fox News and they're never going to hear the truth.
Yeah, but the thing is, and I've been talking about this for years, because I know these people and I know these communities. They're clinging to the pride of the past that, hey, we used to have this factory, that made automobiles or glass or rubber, or go down the list. And because of greed, bad policy, whatever you want to throw out there, that identity was ripped away from these people, and what they were left with was desperation, poverty, broken homes and families, and drug. We can go down the negatives, and I think that the mastery of what Trump brought was he was talking to those people and giving them some false hope that he alone could recreate what they've been clinging to, and I think we have to talk about that.
Oh yeah, he campaigned. And by the way, he was the first political candidate for president in a serious way outside of Bernie Sanders since 1980 to campaign against neoliberalism. Trump lied to everybody that he was going to raise taxes on rich people to the point that his own friends would snub him and he'd get a nosebleed. It was obviously a lie. He lied that he was going to bring back jobs from overseas. He threw out a couple of cosmetic tariffs, basically. He lied that he was going to work on behalf of strengthening unions. He did the exact opposite. He lied that he was going to, make sure more money was going to the working class. Instead, he presided over a transfer of $2 trillion to the top 1%. And I think the fact that, he, with a little help from Russia, won the election based on those lies tells us that by 2016, America was over it with neoliberalism, with Reaganism. America was ready for a change, and they thought they were getting that with Trump, and they didn't think they'd get it with Hillary Clinton because she was still preaching the neoliberalism of her husband, which everybody realized had helped get us into this. Now, Clinton's neoliberalism was nowhere near as bad as Reagan's or Bush's or Trump's, but he was still dancing to that tune, sadly. So now the Democratic Party has woken up. We've got, and Clinton, I don't mean to completely trash Bill Clinton, because the reality is that in 1978, when the Supreme Court changed the rules of the game, and in the Bellotti decision, authored by Lewis Powell, said that if a corporation wants to pour money down the throat of a politician, and that politician only votes the way the corporation wants, that's not corruption or bribery, that's First Amendment protected free speech. And the Republican Party said, cool, gimme. And Reagan floated into office on a tsunami of money, largely from the fossil fuel industry. But the Democrats at that point, 1/3 of America was unionized. There was lots of union money. It was supporting the Democratic Party. And so the Democrats didn't bite. Well, by 1992, Reagan had destroyed about half the union movement. And there wasn't enough money to fund a Democrat, so Bill Clinton had to do something. So he said, okay, we'll take money from the banks and the pharmaceuticals and the insurance companies. At least they're clean industries. We don't have to do that anymore. Now we can figure it out that we can fund elections through the internet. Democrats are going down that road. They've been able to abandon neoliberalism. And we've got a president who's openly challenging neoliberalism, which is great in Joe Biden.
And this is where I come back to my basic premise: is we're at a crossroads at the moment. You're a little bit older than me, so I know you remember the Carter years. I remember growing up as a kid going, we got a president who put solar panels on the White House. There's the potential of, the sun, powering our homes and our cars. I was a kid reading Omni magazine and Ray Bradbury. Science fiction stuff. So for me as a young kid going, the future, the possibilities are incredible. I look back at that 1980 election as a crossroads moment. We made the wrong choice. Reagan came in and ripped the floor out from under us on that.
We did. FDR put us back on the track with basic classic economics, Adam Smith, David Ricardo economics. And what happened? We saw the American middle class grow beyond 50%, the first time it had ever happened in the history of the world. A middle class had gotten that big that fast, or that big even at all. We saw widespread prosperity. Rich people were getting rich, but they weren't getting as rich as fast as middle class people were actually getting, strongly middle class. And then Reagan came into office with these bizarre ideas from these two Europeans, Hayek and Mises, and Milton Friedman, an American, these three economists. And the result of it was, like I said, the destruction of the American middle class. And 1980 was the turning point. And now we really need to repudiate all this, the free trade stuff, the tax cuts for the rich. I mean, we've got three men right now who own more wealth than the bottom half of America. The average billionaire in America is paying a 3% income tax right now. That's neoliberalism. That's Reaganomics. And meanwhile, the rest of us are paying 20, 30% income taxes. It's wrong. It's insane. It is a failed 40-year experiment, and it needs to change.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here, Tom Hartman, talk radio host and author of the most recent book, The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, How Reaganism Gutted America and How to Restore Its Greatness. You can get that at tomhartman.com or Powell's Books. I understand you're doing a book signing. Is this virtual at powellsbooks.com?
Yeah, it'll be virtual tomorrow, and people can sign up at powells.com, and they can order the book at powells.com.
I highly suggest picking this up because, look, this is the history that has to be told, because a lot of people, like I said, are still clinging to that memory of what used to be, that Norman Rockwell version of the 50s and 60s, and don't know the part of the destruction, the fact that those jobs were ripped from people and the pain and suffering that it was caused. And I think it's important that people understand that.
It wasn't an accident. It wasn't magic. It didn't fall out of the sky. This was intentional. And in fact, back in 1951, Russell Kirk, in his book, The Conservative Mind, which animated the whole Barry Goldwater and William F. Buckley movement, predicted that if the middle class continued to grow as rapidly as it was, it would eventually reach the point where more than half of Americans were in the middle class, and they would be wealthy enough that they wouldn't be afraid anymore. And therefore, Kirk predicted, you're going to see three things. You're going to see young people defying their elders, you're going to see women defying their husbands, and you're going to see minorities defying their place, their proper place in society. And sure enough, at the time in the 50s and the early 60s, he was thought of as a crackpot. But by the end of the 1960s, young people were out burning their draft cards, women were burning their bras, and the civil rights movement was rolling along. And at that point, Republicans looked back on the much maligned conservative mind by Russell Kirk and said, holy cow, this guy was a prophet. And so when Reagan came into office in 1980, not only was his path to victory neoliberalism, but the reason for it explicitly was to reduce the American middle class, to put students back into debt, to put women back into their place, and to ensure the primacy of white men in the United States. And I'm not talking about working class white men either. Here we are. This is not an accident.
No, it's all, like I said, it's all done by policy. Bad policy got us here. Good policy, I think, can get us out. Which is why I'm. Biden wasn't my first choice, but I think he's been doing the right things. And I like I said, I think we're at a crossroads moment. I think the legislation to invest in infrastructure improvements, the CHIPS Act, I think the IRA, I think these things are moving us in a positive direction. Well, I don't think they're enough, and I don't think anyone does. It's a start. It's moving us in a direction that I don't know that in 40 years looking back, if we undo, is going to be good for this country in any way.
Yeah, no, we've got to change the path of this. Right now, we've got more wealth inequality in this country than we've seen at any time, except for 1929, and it led straight to the Republican Great Depression. And we can't afford to have that again. We've really got to get this stuff under control and bring back our middle class, re-empower America, restore democracy. Frankly, I mean, this is an oligarchy. When you can't get legislation through Congress because the Supreme Court legalized political bribery, and the entire Republican Party and a small fraction of the Democratic Party are on the take, and any consequential legislation that, for example, the card check. I mean, we've been talking about this for 30 years, 30 friggin' years. Or Elizabeth Warren's new bill, that would basically blow up Taft-Hartley. We've been talking about that since 1947. Harry Truman called it the vicious Taft-Hartley Act, Taft-Hartley Act, excuse me. Now we've got to do it. If we don't, we're going to see America fall farther and farther behind, and you're going to see more and more social unrest, and you're going to see more and more political violence in America. This is the predictable consequence of Reaganism, and we've got to reverse it.
Now, the book, obviously, half the title is How to Restore Our Greatness. How do we get there? I say a big part of this is reorganizing the workplaces. This is why I'm thrilled to see young people with such high expectations and high approval of labor unions and all the organizing that's going on. But how do we get to that place to where I think most people, when you ask them and they put down their, they take off their red hat or blue hat, I think they want to get to the same place. How do we get there?
It's common sense stuff. We need to, number one, raise taxes on the morbidly rich so that they're helping to pay for the cost of our society. And they're not just stashing their money in overseas money bins where it's not productive and helping the economy. Number two, we need to blow up so-called free trade and bring our jobs back to America. We need to re-engage Alexander Hamilton's trade policies that built this country and stood from 1793 all the way up to 1980. Number three, we need to re-empower the labor unions, and this is in no particular order, by the way. We need to re-empower labor by ending Taft-Hartley or something close to it, and at the very least, card check, and re-empowering labor. And we need to clean up our political system. You've got a Republican Party right now that's doing everything it can to purge people off voting rolls and make it hard to vote. We need democracy too.
Which is part of what we're doing on our tour. Going to be promoting the Greg Palast movie Vigilantes, which I think is a huge part of all this. When you're blocking people and throwing people off the voting rolls, you got a problem. And you got people learning for governor, like in my state of Pennsylvania, who are basically coming out saying, if I don't like the election results, well, we'll change them.
Yeah, Mastriano, yeah, he's nuts. It is so sad that it has come to this, but again, you push people up against the wall. You literally rip a middle class lifestyle away from 20% of the American public, from tens of millions of people, and it shouldn't surprise any of us that America has gone a little bit insane. Yeah,
especially when we're looking at rural communities, which is why we're focusing on these places, because I don't think Democrats talk to rural communities all. I think they've given up.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. The fact of the matter is that back in the 80s, the Republican Party decided that the best way to take the Senate was to take a lot of small states. And the good thing about the population-wise, and the good thing about the small states, low population states, is that the media markets were super cheap. So they could go in and they could buy radio stations in Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and Utah, and for a song. And so during the 80s and during the 90s, and Limbaugh was a part of this, they built out this massive right-wing media infrastructure, largely in what are now called red states. A lot of these states were blue states, in the 1970s and even in the early 1980s. And now, there's not a single progressive voice on the air in any of the states that I just named, and dozens of others. And it's a real tragedy, and I'm hopeful that the Democrats will start taking that seriously too. But you're spot on, Rick.
Both of us agree on that. But Tom, I hope people will take a look at the book, The Hidden History of Neoliberalism: How Reaganism Gutted America and How to Restore Its Greatness. You can get it again, as I said, at TomHartman.com or PowellsBook.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Tom, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with my friend.
Thank you, Rick. It's so nice to be back on your program with you. Thank you.
Good stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. And then the Teamsters pushed the law so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind. The union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You know, Tom Hartman brings up an interesting point. You go back to the Reagan era, the end of the Fairness Doctrine, and how the right wing built their talk radio empire and their media dominance. They were smart enough to buy up cheap airwaves. And he's spot on right by saying, look, you know, Iowa, for instance, was a strongly Democratic state. A number of those Western states were Democratic states. They were competitive. They weren't extreme right-wing crazy people. I mean, you know, sadly, a lot of these states they've gone way off the deep end. And it's because, you know, the local radio stations, the media was bought up very cheaply, as he points out, by people with an agenda. And that agenda was to save the quote-unquote free market and free enterprise. And you do that by blaming others. It's the union's fault. It's those immigrants' fault. They're destroying your country. And look, they did it masterfully. I remember, and this is part of what I talk about often. I remember, you know, Limbaugh coming to town when I lived in Cleveland on one of the radio stations, and I remember the first guy who brought up his name. And I remember watching as my lunchroom then started listening to that and other right-wing, you know, kind of anti-union programs, and hearing and watching the lunchroom kind of change to where now we were pitted against each other. I actually had a guy tell me, and this is the amazing, and I'll never forget it, telling me that if there were no union at the place that we worked, that we would make more money and have better benefits. And I just said, you know, from a logic standpoint, where is that happening? And if it is happening, why aren't you there? I'm confused. But again, what the right has done masterfully is they keep with the drumbeat. They keep with the message. And the message is, you know, hyper-individualism, hooray for me and the heck with everyone else, and jealousy. They're taking your tax dollars. And what they understand is, I've had people tell me that they don't want to pay the estate tax. I remember this. I remember vividly going, oh, when I die, I shouldn't have to pay the estate tax. I'm going, are you worth $11 million? Well, no. Then you're not paying the estate tax. That kind of embarrassed millionaire mentality, they really play on. And you got to give them credit on a certain level. Well, they had a mission, they had a plan, they funded it, and they followed through. Democrats didn't. One of my big knocks against the AFL-CIO is they had an opportunity, like Pat Robertson in the 700 Club, to buy a cable network. Could have gotten it for a song. They chose not to. They chose not to invest in the technology of the day to talk to working people. And that's been the knock on the labor movement for a while, in my view, that they haven't done enough to reach out to everybody and to really toot their own horn. Talk about how well they've done for people, the lives they've changed, people like me. I say if it weren't for this union card I keep on my desk and in my wallet, I wouldn't have the things that I have now. Because I worked hard. I played by the rules, and because of this contract that I keep on my desk and that union card, I was compensated fairly. Not every working person can say that. But on the tax front, you know, I look at the reality of what we've created. It's insane. And at some point, we had better figure out how to undo the damage that they've done. And right now, the assault is on education. It's all those teachers. You see Ron DeSantis down in Florida saying, the choice, that's what we need. We need alternatives to the education that for generations educated this country. No. We need all of these other things. We need to do away with teacher certification, and we need vouchers, and we need all of these gimmicks and schemes instead of investing in education to make sure that we all have an opportunity. No. We're going to pick winners and losers on education front. And this is what DeSantis and the Republicans are pushing, and the right-wing machinery. The Heritage Foundation came out with their Education Freedom Report Card. And interestingly enough, the states who have the lowest achievement, who are at the bottom of the scale, they have the best grades because, well, they're school choice. They get vouchers in charter schools. And they don't have any of those overburdensome regulations, like teaching, actual curriculum. It's interesting, the fight we're having, and we're really, again, at another crossroads that as a political observer, I'm going to look back at in 10 or 20 years and go, did we make the right choice or the wrong one? Much like I talked about with Carter and Reagan. We're kind of in that moment. I did want to hit one other story that caught my attention. I love how my right-wing friends say, well, if teachers don't like the job, they can leave. Evidently not. Evidently not in Illinois, because evidently Illinois has a law that says tenured teachers can't just up and quit, that they can deny them leaving their job. And if they do leave, they pull their license. And that is evidently what is happening to two teachers in this Unit 5 school in McLean County, which is, one of the big school districts there. These special education teachers don't want to work there anymore. They want to go to a different district. And remember, my Republican friends are always saying, you got choice. You got choice. Evidently, special ed teachers are hard to get. So the district is saying, no, you can't go. We're not accepting your resignation. And if you do go, we're going to have your license pulled. Now, what I found interesting, and this is, again, one of those moments, if you read down into the story that was there, one of the person, the resource director of this Unit 5, said, look, the news is we're losing 300 to 400 teachers every year now. And you go, why do you think that is? Well, I would argue it's the poor pay to start. It's the constant abuse that we're seeing from parents and right-wing activists who are creating this environment that says that every teacher's a pedophile and every teacher wants to indoctrinate their children. And people are just, I got to tell you, I wouldn't want to be a teacher, not in this day and age. No matter how pure your intentions and how much you want to do good, there's always going to be that person there going, no, you're horrible. But I find it interesting, that frame of, you could always quit your job. Not if you're a teacher in Illinois. Evidently not. Wow. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let me know what you think, especially on that front. But if you've got an idea for a city along the way in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa that you think we should be stopping in, shoot me an email. Let me know why. And maybe we'll be stopping in one of those places. We're going to put out the tour dates here in the next 2 weeks. So if there's a place near you, by all means, we hope to see you. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom
back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Remember, make sure you grab the podcast. You can get it there at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Interesting little story coming out of ABC News as it appears Jeff Bezos' phallic rocket, evidently it went limp. Capsule carrying experiments into space, evidently parachuted safely to the ground, but the Blue Origin rocket needed a blue pill to continue to go into space. It crashed, obviously. Too much on the phallic part of the Bezos, where the little Bezos went, or actually a big Bezos went boom. I guess the rocket, the New Shepard rocket, was barely a minute into its flight from West Texas when flames shot out and the capsule separated. The experiments floated to the ground safe, but the rest of the rocket went limp. And it does. If you look at the rocket, it kind of does look. It looks very phallic. You couldn't have designed something else. There is that. Also, interesting story coming out of Reuters, and again, this is one of those moments. Starbucks, the world is watching you. Evidently, Starbucks is spending a bunch of money adding benefits to their non-union workers. Now, understand, none of the workers who have voted for the union actually have a contract. So I got to argue that this is a violation of labor law, but evidently tomorrow is Investors Day for Starbucks. So this is kind of to make to make the investors happy, or to say that they're doing something to fight back against the union efforts that are going on there. But this seems illegal to me, and it seems a moment where the NLRB should be stepping in with unfair labor practices and doing something. But this is classic union busting stuff. Going, hey, we'll give you some. You just vote down the union, and we'll give you a little something. We'll make things a little bit better, so that workers don't organize. And the question that I always come back to is, why would they do this? What is so egregious? What violation would workers make if they organized and said, look, we want to share the wealth we create? It seems interesting that they've got the money now to make things better, only after the threats of workers organizing come up. And this is one of those moments where ask yourself just the simple logic questions. Why now? Why now are you coming out with these programs in the face of this organizing campaign where your workers are saying, hey, we've not been happy for a very long time, and we've been telling you this for a very long time. Now we're going to do something about it. I'm interested to see what the administration is going to do on this front, and why we need really major comprehensive labor law reform to hold these companies accountable. Now, look, this isn't a poor company. Starbucks has got like $3 billion in cash on hand. They're expected to generate another $3.5 billion in cash in the next year. They could make workers' lives better. They could schedule better. They could do a lot of things. But because they're such a behemoth, nope, they're not going to do it. And this is where we as working people have to stop looking at these companies as benevolent or the good guys and start looking at them as what they are. A way to have an economy that works for everybody. A way to demand that work is rewarded. And we do that by people organizing. And this is why I think the tour that we're planning and we're putting together is important to take advantage of this moment where, for me, the solutions start with people demanding that their labor is worth something. That their labor is worthy of a living wage, of health care, of retirement security, of dignity, of scheduling, of dignity of life-work balance. This is that kind of moment for me. And as I've been saying, I think we're at a crossroads. What direction will we go? Will we keep moving in the direction that Biden and the Biden administration have laid out? Reshoring manufacturing, made in the USA policies, strong union policies.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express.